Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. I'm Pinar Vanj. I have the absolute pleasure of hosting Patrick MacLeamy today. Patrick is an American architect who spent 50 years at HOK, a leading architecture and engineering firm. Rising from junior designer to CEO, Patrick witnessed the company's growth from a single Midwestern office to 27 locations around the world. During his time at HOK, Patrick led many significant projects, including the Moscone Center in San Francisco and King Khalid International Airport in Saudi Arabia. Patrick has been heavily involved in efforts to improve the building industry, serving on various committees and receiving multiple honors for his work. He was a founding member of buildingSMART International in 1994 and now serves as the international chairman. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Patrick MacLeamy. Patrick is an architect and the chairman of buildingSMART International. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here and speak with so many young people who are doing their best to understand architecture and this building industry that we're part of. It's a lifelong project to understand it fully, and it's something that I've studied my entire career and continue to be amazed at things that they did not teach me in school that I had to learn on my own.
Well, that's why we're doing this podcast, and that's why we have speakers like you joining us. So we're very much looking forward to this conversation. We would actually love to hear more about your background and how you came to where you are today.
Okay, well, thank you. I always wanted to be an architect. My grandfather was a carpenter, and he built houses for people, and he drew the house plans before the computer, of course, on his kitchen table with a little homemade drafting board. And he taught me how to draw house plans. So when I was too young to know what an architect was, I wanted to be a carpenter so I could draw house plans. And that stuck with me. And never wavered from that, and studied architecture. It's a long process. The University of Illinois, where I went, plus some studies in Europe, taught me a lot about history and about design, but not too much about the technical side of architecture, and nothing at all about how do you run a practice. How do you successfully run a practice and be able to make a profit and pay yourself and pay your employees and those kinds of things? I had to learn all of that on my own or in my career. And I spent exactly 50 years in one firm, HOK. Started when the firm was just one office in an unlikely place, St. Louis, Missouri, in the middle of the U.S., and stepped down 50 years later as the CEO, with the firm having 2,000 people in 27 offices around the world. I learned a lot about mistakes, about correcting mistakes, about people, about money, and things that architects don't usually like to think about. But I came with a very clear conclusion, which is that for architects to do a really great job and take a good place in our society, they need to be well paid and well fed. They need to have steady jobs, not hand to mouth, so they can actually plan for their future and plan to do really great buildings. So to me, the underpinning of a great architecture is it's like a guild, the old building guilds. Someone takes care of the artists, painters, and sculptors so they can do beautiful work. So I think the modern architecture firm needs to take care of its people. People are everything. It's not computers. It's not the latest whiz-bang software program. It's people that do the work, that do the creating, that serve the clients. And the job of a modern architecture firm is to take care of its people. And if you're not doing that, if you're not paying them well or giving them a career, they will leave and you will have to start over again. And that's the story of too many firms, is a kind of a roller coaster ride of boom and bust. So how do you overcome that and develop a strong firm as a foundation for people to be their best, where they can grow up in the firm? And as they learn more skills and become more valuable to you, to the firm, you can hang on to them, keep them by giving them first better pay and then eventually a share of ownership, so that attracts them to stay. That's what happened to me, and I wish it could happen to every young person that's listening to this, is find a nurturing firm where the people that own the firm want to give it all away to the next generation and teach them everything that they know and give them the means to not only be good architects, but have families or have personal lives as well, whatever they want. That's the secret to doing great work, is to take care of people.
I love that you say this as it's something so relatable. You're saying this after like 50 years being in the same firm, right? So it's like the mega insight of everything, like what comes first. And also, like, exactly to your point, whatever we're trying to accomplish in this world, right? If we're trying to solve problems, make change, adopt new technologies, whatever, these are all human challenges. And in the end, it requires humans to be on board and be happy and be. So in that sense, I think we often are so focused on solving a problem that we forget what real like assets are in order to be able to like solve those problems. And I'm so glad we're like anchoring the conversation like around this right now. Yeah.
Well, and you know, if you don't start with that premise that people are everything, you won't actually have success, as the kind of design success that every architect dreams of. I think of maybe one of the most creative people who ever lived, Michelangelo. Was a painter and a sculptor and a real artisan and an architect. He was taken care of by the Medici family and then by the Pope. They basically gave him a workshop and a bunch of nice Carrara marble to work with and some nice tools and some assistants, and said, here, do great work. And they gave him a living so that he could focus on what he knew how to do. Exactly. And I do think that we all have a little Michelangelo in us, and it's a matter of having somebody nurture us, teach us what we don't know, help us to learn to be our best, help us to gain experience, which every architect needs to have. When you come out of school, you really don't know how to practice architecture. And not all of us will turn out to be Michelangelos, but we can have great careers helping clients and helping each other succeed. And I think that the world needs great architecture. It needs, I'm not talking about just zippy new architecture. We need great architecture that's also for people. That's where people live, and that's where they get educated, and where when they're sick they go to a hospital. That's all architecture. And the world needs us to be at our best, especially with the way the world is changing. We're all living mostly in urban areas now, and it's mostly not very good, not very noble. And architects need to step forward and do much, much more. But it starts with the kind of firms that we have, so that architects, young people who are architects or landscape architects or interior designers, I'm calling this all in the design professions, so that we have a place to be grounded and a safe place to work, where people appreciate us. And that's inside that firm, that kind of culture. If you're able to achieve that, and it takes a lot of discipline, then it allows the firm to compete like a great big team, to compete with other firms, or with to compete to overcome the challenges of how do you design in urban area with traffic and pollution and crime and this and that, how do you do your best anyway and help the city where you are to be its very best? And it starts with the firm that takes care of its people. Not only taking care of them, but steady paychecks. When I was a youngster in college, I worked in the summer for a local architect in my hometown, and we got paid every Friday. And sometimes the boss would come into the drafting room, that's what we had then, all by hand, and say, I don't have the money today. I'm sorry, we'll have to wait till next week because so-and-so client did not pay us in time. So that's also part of practice, is you have to be good enough at the business side of architecture to understand how to make a profit, how to collect the fees from the clients, and how to have reserves to cushion the firm when a client is a little bit slow in paying, and how to hold your firm together financially so that, again, the people can do the good work. So it's a lifetime of learning. I did write a book about it. And I've done a podcast series on just this. So if someone wants to really do a deep dive, they're certainly welcome to. But it starts with people.
Yeah, and I love that you gave that example, because also, like when you're studying architecture, nobody teaches you about like cash flow management, right?
Yes, that's right.
Like it impacts so much, and actually just goes beyond being cash flow management. It impacts like project quality, motivation, like everything.
Yes, everything. Well, and if you don't have cash flow management in your firm, and people are not being paid on time, or maybe you're paying your people, but your vendors and your consultants are not being paid on time, that's not a very good practice. You will find that your consultants, let's say, if they're not being paid regularly, they'll be more interested in helping the firm across town that does pay them regularly. And same with your vendors, the people that sell you supplies, the people that anything. Paying people on time is a sign of good practice. It's healthy. I spent a long time digging HOK out of a big hole that had been dug where we didn't have enough cash. And we had the bank angry with us. We had an investor that was angry. And we were still making our payroll, but we had a lot of consultants that were very unhappy with us. And how do you dig out of a hole? Well, you start building and collecting your money that you work so hard to earn. When architects work, it's typical. Somebody hires us to design something. We're very excited about it. And we start to work, maybe even before we have a contract. And clients will be
This sounds familiar to so many people right now.
Clients would be very, very happy to let you work for free. If you don't ask for a contract, they'll just say, well, yes, that's fine. I'll pay you when but could you just do a little bit more? And that's being taken advantage of. That's slavery in the United States was outlawed in 1865. So that's a form of slavery that too many firms fall into, especially if they're desperate. Yeah. The right way to do it is to, and it's hard work, very hard work, is to convince a client that you have what it takes to help them solve their design problem, to help them get that new building, whatever it is, and that you are worth it to have a contract, a proper contract, and to be properly paid on time. And when you work for a client like that, and you're paid on time, things tend to go well. If projects are started properly with a contract, with a good, clear understanding of the business side, I'm going to bill you every month, I'm going to do progress billings, I'm going to do whatever it is, and you actually stick to that and don't shirk from it, The clients, if they're happy with the work, they will pay. If clients are not paying you, it's either because you have the wrong client or perhaps they're not as happy with the work. That's another problem. If your client is unhappy, one of the signals that they send is to not pay. And so you need to also not only take care of your people, but you need to stick to your client. Your client is, after all, it's your customer. And what's the difference between a client and a customer? You could say, well, maybe if I'm doing professional service like designing, or I'm a doctor, I have patients or I have customers or clients. If I'm selling apples on the street, I guess I have customers, but it's really kind of the same. You need to give them something that they're willing to pay for, and they need to be willing to pay you on time for the work that you do. So good little lessons in that for every firm, every young architect listening to this saying, well, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in becoming the next great designer. And well, that's fine, but you also like to get paid regularly and have food on the table. So it's all connected, but it does start with people. And yes, you have to have clients. Clients are like gold. You have to treat them well. You have to stay in touch. If you own the firm and you have someone else working for your client, you better make sure that you meet that client regularly, once a week, once a month, have lunch or have a cup of coffee together. How are we doing? How's my team doing? What do you think of my new young designer or the new project leader that I put on the job? Is he or she doing what you need? Are you satisfied? Just get that feedback. Don't leave it to someone else to tell you that they're unhappy. Ask the client, and if they're unhappy, give them the chance to tell you that, well, I wish that such and so had been something better. And then you run toward trouble. You go correct that, whatever it is.
I think, we just said people first, and this is kind of like goes to all stakeholders, right? In the end, client side are the people that you work with, and it's all people relationships and management, and genuinely showing that you care for the project, for the people, for the relationship, right? And I think what you said in terms of also, why we even started practicing architecture, well, I want to say it was for people, because sometimes it also gets a bit distracted. But initially, we started with creating shelters for people, right? That was our initial intention.
That's it.
I think the more far we are removed from people first culture in a firm, I think we also are removed from people first outcomes. You know this way more than I do, right? So there are many outcomes that don't necessarily serve people in their best interest.
That's right.
And so how do you, I guess and this is fascinating to me, because we were on a different episode with an environmental psychologist, and she was talking about how architectural psychology was a common phrase in 1970s. I'm not now, what happened? Where did we lose that human touch? And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I do think that the challenge for the architect is much more difficult now. It's a bigger challenge than it was when I started in the practice 55 years ago. The computer can actually get in the way between people, especially with COVID. We're having Zoom meetings, and people are working, in their pajamas and so on, instead of working with each other directly. And I'm a proponent of getting people together. People are a team. If you do things properly, and the client and the consultants and the contractor become part of the same team, if you do it just right, where everybody is working for the same good outcome. That's the ideal. If you let too many things get in the way of that, then the project has an excellent chance of failure. So, and it really is a people business. Oh my gosh, I did not understand that at first. I thought, well, it'll be obvious that I'm doing great design work, so people will just naturally like me and like the work. and it did not work that way. They wanted to like me first and then appreciate my work. So they wanted to see me as a person, and I'm sure it's that is as old as humanity. People needing to be friends. You can do the best work if everybody's pulling together. It's obvious. It's like a sports analogy. Teamwork. Architecture in a very real way is a team sport. It's not yes, you can have individual stars, but I would rather have the team where everybody knows exactly how to help each other pass the ball or score the goal or whatever it is, so that the team itself succeeds. And if you have individual stars that don't get along well with other people, you also have a formula for failure. That's not to say that someone cannot be a star, but they need to also be a team player. They need to work with others in their own firm, in the consulting firm, on the client side, and on the contractor side. Those are all people that need to work together to assure the best outcome, which is a completed, successful building that's on time and on budget with a very happy client. That is a lot, and it takes that teamwork to make that happen. That is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you brought up team play, because I think we popularized the concept of star architecture for a while and creating idols, which I think a whole generation simply, I don't want to say got it wrong, but also I think imagined a different model of doing business. And you did mention, Medici's, and I'm thinking of like Machiavelli's book, like The Prince, right? It's better to be feared than to be loved. And I think we followed that ethos for a little bit, but then that does not sustain, right? Like it could work, like, wartime, it works like temporarily, you definitely get things done, but
yes,
it does not necessarily sustain.
What I found in my career was fear. If someone is afraid of their boss or the leader of the firm, or maybe afraid of the client or the contractor, it is a great big barrier in the way of actually getting good work done. It works temporarily, maybe. Fear is a real motivator for people getting a job out on time or something.
Yeah.
But it actually, over the long time, I've done my share of hiring people and also of letting people go. And most often, it was the people that did not get along with other people that were either fearsome people, that is, that tended to dominate others, or people who were just all about themselves. So I didn't take any psychology courses in university, but I had to learn psychology all along the way, because it's at the core of everything in the practice. It's how do you get people motivated, and how do you get them to work together for the common good, which is serving that client, getting that project completed, winning that next project, whatever it is. It takes teamwork. It takes people working together. I find it very difficult to imagine. I know that some people do this, a sole practitioner. You have to have extraordinary skills in all directions to be a sole practitioner. I find it much easier, actually, to have a firm where you can share the work and share the responsibilities with others, and find that, oh, well, I'm not very good at this, but someone over on the other side of the office is really good at it. Let's let him or her take care of that. There's a natural sorting out when you have a firm, just like people sort themselves out in sports teams. Some people are good at catching the ball and others are good at throwing the ball. So let's all find our correct place. I joined HOK thinking I was going to be a designer, and I started as one, but found I had very natural talents or abilities to organize things, and eventually became a project manager, and then the managing principal in the office, and then finally the CEO. because I was really interested in the stuff that they don't teach us in school. So somebody needs to learn all that and take care of that piece of it in order for a firm to be successful. And if you have a firm of one person or three or 10 people, which I think the average firm in the U.S. is eight people, among those 8 people, there has to be someone who's interested in billing and collecting, and who's interested in developing a budget for a project that will actually sustain the firm through the project and make some profit at the end. And let me just say a word about profit. Some people think of profit as a kind of a dirty word, that if you make a profit, it means you didn't use every last penny of the fee to improve the design. That's actually not true, in my opinion. What the profit does is it goes back into the firm. It doesn't go into the owner's pocket. It goes in the form of bonuses, raises, maybe investment in that new computer system, maybe hiring an expert in some part or piece of a building that the firm needs to be successful at getting that next job. That's where the money goes. And if you're not making a profit, it also means you're not building up any reserve cash to use for rainy days, or when that client doesn't pay you, or to use when that extraordinarily talented person comes in your door and you'd like to hire them, but you don't have an immediate job for them. You hire them anyway because you don't want to miss on that talent. So profit is a really good word, and anyone who's been in the practice for a while understands it's not just going in the owner's pocket, it's going back into the firm in hundreds of different ways.
Yeah, and creates a healthier firm to also better perform for the projects too. Like it's,
yes,
like I don't think you would necessarily deliver a great job for a client if you're barely breaking even.
Well, and I think that's it. Some people think that in order to be successful as a designer, you have to suffer. It's kind of a starving artist syndrome, and you have to have such passion for the work that you're willing to starve yourself, and then finally some patron will notice and start buying your paintings or your sculpture.
Yeah.
And architecture is at the end of the day, there's an art to it. There's no question about that, but there's also a great practical side. It is shelter, and it does need to stand up and not fall down. And it does need to keep the rain out, and all these very, very practical things. And the way good practical buildings get built is by people who are well paid and have good steady jobs and have the chance to think clearly about it, and they're not starving.
Yeah.
That they're well cared for, so that they can care for their families if they have one, or have their own money to plan for their own future.
Yeah.
So I think it's all about taking really good care of people so your good people can take care of your clients. That's a simple way of thinking about it.
Definitely. And if we don't set that balance, that also kind of starts defining the population or human body that we start seeing in the profession, like people who can sustain without relying on paycheck, which is sort of creating its own problem, right? Then we're questioning, why don't we see enough diversity among our teams, or even, the workflow, exactly to your point, if we can't necessarily hire people, even though we may not need it at the moment, but maybe it relieves pressure from other team members who are very much deserving. That also creates more inclusion in terms of like gender diversity and all of that, right?
Yeah, sure.
So many women who had to leave a job at an architectural firm and go to a client side because they couldn't sustain as a mother, for example, in the profession.
Yes.
And it's on repeat, right? We see these so many times. So I think understanding that profit could and should be for people, and therefore a profitable firm does matter.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, in terms of genders, when I started in the practice, again, 55 years ago, before most everybody listening to this podcast was born, it was almost all men. I think there were two women in my graduating class out of, I don't know, hundreds of men. But in the time that I was in the practice dramatically changed. And when I left HOK, again, 2,000 people, it was 53% women, and people of all colors and orientations and so on. I don't actually care what color you are or what gender you are. Can you serve your client and get along well with your team? Do you have a talent and a passion for the work? If so, you belong in this, what we called the HOK family. And it should be like a family, and it should be, of course, it should be inclusive.
Yeah.
But if you're the owner, if you're looking out for your firm, you need to make sure that you're always on the lookout for people who can fit into your firm, your family, if I can use that word, and add something new to it to enrich the team, a new talent. Maybe someone with a passion that didn't exist before. I remember at HOK hiring a young woman with a great passion for sustainable design, and she's now the head of sustainable consulting for HOK, a very important position. So yes, the door is open and should be, and a well-run firm should always be having enough room, enough capacity to squeeze in that one more person if all these other things are if you're taking care of your clients, if you're collecting your money, you have a cash reserve, you know how to manage cash flow, etc., and if you pay your bills and your payroll always gets paid on time. That's the first thing. If you're not paying your people well, you know what'll happen? The really best people that you have will leave first, and the people that are weaker or maybe less experienced will stick around and keep their heads down and hope that you don't lay them off. Well, you want the best people. You want people to be knocking at your door. Can I come in and work for you? That's what you really want. You want to be popular. Why? Well, because it's a great place to work, and because people always get paid on time, and because the benefits are there, and because the work is exciting, and the opportunities for growth are there. That's a lot, but that's what it takes. And we're not just building one building at a time, one stone on top of another at a time anymore. Buildings are complex, difficult projects to design and build. We've got lots of different technical requirements. We've got code requirements on code requirements, and all of that takes specialized knowledge. So the architect can be a generalist, but you better have people who are specialized that know how to comply with the code and knows how to work with the structural engineer to make the building seismically safe, let's say, and so on. It's a great, big, complicated thing to do all of this and still not lose your soul. So start with the people. Start with the people.
Yeah. And I mean, we say this all the time. I guess like practicing it is something else, right? Like you're only as good as your team. And not only, a building itself is such a complicated project, right? But also the world that we operate in today is highly, highly complex and volatile too. So we would be super naive to assume that we could address any of these problems by like certain skill set only, and without like the diverse like professional and lived experience of people. And I think
yes.
We often say like collaboration is a very loosely used term, but we really need to understand what it actually means and how we effectively can collaborate, even like within your own team and beyond your team, the consultants, other firms potentially, and also your client at this point, because a good client all helps create a great outcome.
Yes.
How are you going to be on the same mindset with your client as well? Going back to, it's people management and cultivating those like relationships.
Yes. It is, it's the most human of things to do, I think. It's also one of the most challenging, complex, technically getting more complex all the time. Just think about this. If you go back a few hundred years, buildings were built mostly with stone or wood or brick. And the stone was quarried locally. So that's why if you go to Europe and you see these beautiful towns, these villages, they all look so wonderful because they're all all built from the same quarry, the same stones. Well, now, when you are specifying pieces and parts to your building, your windows or your doors or your ceiling or whatever it is, you don't know where that's going to come from. It could be made in Japan or China or somewhere else in the world. It could as easily be a Mitsubishi elevator instead of an Otis elevator. And so the marketplace for the building products is global. And I argue, and I got started with buildingSMART, this organization, this nonprofit that I was one of the founders, to take advantage of this. If you have a global marketplace for buildings and infrastructure, the built environment, how do you make that the most efficient, and how do you make it work with languages and different codes in different countries and so on? It's a big, complicated thing, but I believe that our future is we'll have better buildings because we can buy the best products to exactly what we specify without being too concerned about where they come from, as long as we're collaborative about it. So it's a bright future out there for the young people if they seize that day. But the basics are, you've got to take care of your people in your firm, and you've got to know how to run your firm like a business and make a profit and take care of your people so they can take care of your clients.
What are your thoughts on, because you mentioned kind of like the passion we have in our industry, and which is driving us likely, starting projects without having a contract or whatever, like it's, it's like a chain effect. And I think especially for people in like creative fields like this, and maybe this is like in architecture and fashion or in like other design professions, you see this often. There is the tendency, both on the internal side, I mean, I think maybe this is like going away slowly, but really to exactly to your point, like underpay or, treat it like trusting your own brand asset to not care about turnover. What if we don't care if people leave, others will come, like that attitude. But also knowing that attitude exists, it impacts the client side in terms of like, I don't want to say not respecting, but also not paying on time or not, because these people do it anyway, right? So we have these like brilliant people who are in a profession because they really care about things and not first money too. Like it's not like all architects are like great with like money. We're not. But then that's creating this side effect in the industry of like, they will work anyway, right? Which is impacting maybe like even project budgets, right? Like, because we need to have healthy project budgets to be profitable. And then again, like to create that return for the people. So of course, like you talked about the leadership aspect of it, like as a good leader, what are you responsible of? What do you think the young architects and creatives should do to kind of create this push, or even like the new culture of working? What can they do when they feel junior in a position and maybe they don't have that much influence, but how can they encourage change in a way?
Well, I think honestly, you put your finger on it. The best thing a young person can do, in my opinion, is get into what I call a good firm. And my definition of a good firm is one that does pay people. No unpaid internships, no slave labor, where there is a low turnover, not a high turnover, where young people are buddied up with someone with more experience so they can learn. We have a mentoring system at HOK and have had for decades, where young people coming in, they're given an onboarding. It's a one-day kind of seminar of here's what to expect, because it's intimidating, right? You're going in from maybe university or small firm into a great big firm with 100 or 200 people in an office. It's intimidating. So we use great care in bringing people in and then pair them up with a buddy who can help them, somebody who's been at work for a couple of years, who can help them learn and understand what to do. Even simple things like, where's the coffee? And things like that. So that's my definition of a good firm. When I graduated from I got a master's degree in urban design, I went to Boston because Boston was where a lot of the firms were that were in the architecture magazines of that time, and interviewed with a couple of firms there. And in a couple of cases, they both said to me, well, you have an interesting portfolio, would love to hire you. We really can't, but if you want to work as an unpaid intern for 6 months, maybe then we'll be able to hire you.
6
Well,
months.
I couldn't wait to get out of there. And first I needed the money. I needed a job so I could feed myself and put a roof over my head. I was just graduating and had no money. So you've got to, it comes right back to what I started with. For a young person, finding that firm that's the right fit for you or where you are. And if you're in a firm that's the right place, you will also find you can grow and learn and become a better, more experienced architect or designer or engineer or whatever you are. You can become better at it, not just used and then thrown away. That's what I think we need as a profession. If I could just make this blunt statement, we need to get our act together as a profession and learn how to operate properly, and so that we can regain the esteem of the clients and society as really important players in shaping the environment that we all have to live and work in. I want us to be the shapers of the urban environments that we all live in now, but we're not good enough yet. We have to really work at this. So I'm a man on a mission to change the profession and get us to regain, back in the early parts of the 1900s, architects were not on a pedestal exactly, but they were pillars of society, along with the doctor and maybe the minister, and the professors and so on. And that is not so much true these days. And instead, we've got star architecture here and there, and a lot of firms struggling to put projects together and struggling to get paid by clients who don't really understand what good design is. And good design, we could have a whole hour talking about what really good design means. It's more than a pretty face. It's just like people. It's all the way through good. If you're designing something that's really all the way through good, that means that it really works well. It doesn't just look pretty. It works for whatever the purpose is. Usually at these times if it's a webinar, I hold up my iPhone and I say, here, this is good design. It fits in my hand, but I have the whole world at my, I can talk or seek with my thumb. The whole world is open to me. And it can do all these wonderful things, and it's affordable. And if I drop it, which occasionally I do, it usually does a pretty good job of not breaking. That's great design. And it's all the way through. If you people don't understand that, it's just I want to design a pretty building. Well, yeah, but what about the all the way through building? You want it to be really, really, really good all the way through. again, I'm getting off track here, but
No. I think it's very relevant and kind of like ties up everything we said, right? Like, because there's, a lot of conversation around like form follows function, but what does that function really mean? And then also in a capitalist world, sometimes it's like more form follows finance, which is also true.
yes,
But then also like, how does form get inspired by people? I think that should be the starting point of the conversation, and then we figure out the function and the finance and all of that, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
the initial question being, what are we doing and why and for who, right?
Yep.
And in that sense, I think what you talked about through your entire experience is like everything is so interconnected, right? Like how you, when you pay your people reflects in everything else. And that's why I love like talking about these, because we see a lot of surface problems in an industry. Like it's like so clear that we can do better in built environment. That's already given, right? But like, what are some underlying reasons of the problems that we're seeing today? And I think people treatment is one, and it generally is probably the first in any industry where you're seeing any type of problem.
Yes.
In the end, as you said, human psychology is everything. Is anything.
We if we're going to get better, we don't need to work harder. I think we all work plenty hard. We need to be a lot smarter about it.
Yeah.
And it is a back to basics with people. It's also learning basics of how to run a business successfully so that the cash flow and so on are there. And yes, it's getting to the position where you're strong enough as a firm that you can say no to a client that wants to do something you don't agree with.
Yeah.
And you can do it in a good professional way of saying, there's a better way to do this. I'd be happy to work with you if you want to do it this better way. And if you want to do it the way that you just described, you can find someone else. I don't want to subject my people in my firm to doing it the way you want to do it. It's an amazing thing when you're positioned to do that, to actually say no to a client that's maybe overzealous about making money, let's say. It's amazing what happens when you say no. Often it makes them, in a very odd kind of way, they're really attracted to you then, because you had the courage to say no. But it all starts with, you have to have a well put together firm with all those things we've just talked about for this session. And once you have that, all good things are possible. So it's the fundamentals of getting a firm put together. Again, I've said it, I'll say it one last time, I guess. The firm that's really successful takes care of its people so they can take care of clients. And there's a whole bunch of things that you have to do to take care of your people.
I think this is a great note to kind of wrap up our conversation. I do want to also finally ask, what else is keeping you busy these days, and anything you should be aware of?
Well, buildingSMART is my other big passion. I've been at that. buildingSMART is an international nonprofit that is led by the building and infrastructure industries, led by practitioners. And we are developing open digital standards to allow people to be more efficient and effective at the use of the computer for design and coordination of the work. What does all that stuff mean? It means we want the computer to be more of an aid and helper to the architect, not a barrier to be overcome. We want good. I'll give you one short example. When I'm designing a building, I want my computer, if I'm designing on the computer, I want my computer to be able to tell me as I manipulate the spaces and add and subtract windows and add and subtract overhangs. I want it to be able to tell me what my energy consumption is doing and what my cost is, so that it's real-time feedback, so I can do a better job, more informed job as an architect. If you want to go deep green to zero carbon or zero net energy, you have to do it with open BIM solutions. And you have to start in design. You can't wait until the building is designed and then bolt on deep green. You have to, it's one of those all the way through things.
Exactly.
So that's my other big passion. In fact, I'm headed to Rome on Friday for, we have 3 meetings a year that I attend. So this one is in Rome. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, enjoy.
And we have chapters all across the world, including Asia, Africa, Europe, and North America. We're going to get our first South American chapter probably this year. So it's quite exciting. It's a very international group. We call it the International Friendship Club because we all work together to set standards, digital standards for the work we do, using people from all these different countries in very large working groups and committees. Anyway, that's my other big, plus my wife and my 2 grown children and our beautiful grandchildren. That's my other passion.
Well, this is, I think it's a great case example of how to effectively do international collaboration. And again, investing in the people while also having technology and computers help us along the way. So, Patrick, thank you so much. This was so amazing. And I love that you had the ability and humility to condense kind of like all these years of experience into a very relatable and actionable form too. I think we can all take away things from it, and everything you mentioned was definitely very near and dear to my heart. So thank you for all of that, and thank you.
It's my absolute pleasure. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and you're a perfect listener as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
And that is this week's episode of What's Wrong with the Podcast. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcasting platform. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Links can be found in the episode description, and you can also find them on our website, podcast.what'swrongwith.xyz. If you found value in the show, we would appreciate if you could rate us and leave a review, or you can simply tell your friends about us. For more details on our guests, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Don't forget to join us next week. Thank you for listening.